disrespectful thing you've said that we
Okay.
have to edit out of this podcast.
Yeah,
for
we
being
have to keep it in.
So,
So, welcome back to episode 6 of Simply Simple. We are slowly getting closer to that 10-digit, Drew. How do you feel?
like I said, I think everyone is wondering if I'll make it to episode 10. I think that's the
You
ongoing.
put everyone on edge.
I just have to create some cliffhangers for the viewers. Otherwise, they won't find a reason to tune in.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, it feels nice being back on video, but it also felt equally as nice not being on video. We felt powerful.
yes, we have multiple studios, and we are in our top studio for now.
We were filming in Hawaii, and you guys couldn't even tell. However, we hope you really liked not seeing our faces. If you usually tune in to see our faces, I'm not sure why you would do that, but you're doing it, so that's okay. Oh, before we even go, I just want to say our reel absolutely, I don't want to use
Slapped.
the word slapped, as if the airport didn't teach us, but one of our reels, which is the first generation episode post-trailer release, that got 3.5 thousand, 3.6 thousand.
I think 1.6.
Was it? No.
The whole-
Yeah, that's right. That's how I wish we were at
You know-
that point.
Yes, we all do, but we could get there soon.
Well, that reel got 1.6 thousand views, and that is huge for a small channel.
Yes, so thank you everyone who is watching. I don't know who's watching or who
Thank
would
you.
watch, but thank you for doing it.
Yes, thank you. Across not only Australia, but apparently India and America. So shout out to you, Chris. We see you from New York. And Shannon. We love you, Shannon. This episode, we're talking about selective schools and specifically the test we can't pass, Rethinking Selective Schools, which is an add-on from our last episode.
Episode 5.
That's right.
Yes, and we did both pass some sort of test to get into selective schools ourselves.
It wasn't too hard, but I'm sure it's a bit harder these days.
Maybe we can get into that.
All right, Drew. Well, let's get into it. So we're going to speaking? I can't speak apparently. I'm shy. I'm camera shy. You know, back on video,
I think everyone's seen you
All
in some modeling
all types of emotions.
university thing. I don't know.
We were great ambassadors, Drew. I did a total of 2 shifts, I think. Anyways, so we're going to be talking about our experience of selective schools and whether or not they deliver against what they promised. Are they a perceived privilege or a social segregation of students? So, Drew,
Social segregation of students.
you know, I actually wrote that, but I'm so proud of myself.
That is a
So for those who don't know, what is a selective school?
So, selective school, using the terminology of this podcast, is a form of academic and social segregation of gifted or smart students, or students perceived to be those things, from other students in that would ordinarily go to school together. So, for example, how school normally works, how public schools normally work in Sydney is you would live in a suburb or you'd live in a location, and there will be schools in the suburbs, and they'll take an intake of all the students that live in that location. Some students might choose other alternative schooling methods, such as homeschooling or private school. Selective schools are essentially schools that can be anywhere across the state, and they are schools that have some sort of entry criteria to get in, normally a test, and the idea is that they select the best students to join the school.
I'm telling you, it's not even the social segregation, it's a multifaceted segregation. But Drew, did you know, as of 2025, and this is from The Guardian, that New South Wales has 42 fully and partially selective high schools catering to, quote unquote, high potential and gifted students?
Do you see any problem with that?
We'll get into it very soon, Drew.
That's an interesting use of words, I must say.
I know. I think that's quite controversial, very segregating.
very socially segregating.
So you mentioned criteria. So selective schools, from our experience, choose.
Disclosure, we went to selective schools.
Yes, we probably should have said that up front. They choose those who are academically gifted. And my selective school was only year 11 and 12. So I left my high school at year 10 and went to another high school. Shout out to my St. Mary's crew. We love you. You mentioned criteria, Dhruv. So how does a selective school differ from a normal unselective school?
Well, here's the thing: all schools are selective.
That's
to some
right.
Extent, you can't just get into a school no matter what. So like even the local schools are selective because you have to live in the catchment area. So they select for proximity, and selective schools select for brains, supposedly.
For brains. I like the little jingle you did with your hand.
Right? So
Yeah.
that's the main difference. So selective schools is the idea that you have to have talent first, and they select on that. As the Guardian says, high potential and gifted students. That's who they try to sort for.
Well, it's interesting because when I applied to a selective school in year 10 to a completely different high school, as I mentioned, I think the criteria is more so, it would be different to what I would have faced compared to what you would have faced. And what I mean by that is that my selective school would have really looked at my marks and application as a bit more of a mature student. So the criteria differs.
Your criteria?
My criteria, I didn't have to do a test, which is pretty interesting knowing that you did a test. My criteria, and this was many, many years ago, many years ago,
so long ago.
very many years ago, we had an application where we had to answer a set of questions, and they could be like, why do you want to apply to this school? What job do you want to do when you graduate university? So really, I guess, generic, but questions you should have some kind of idea of. But that was pretty much it. And I think I needed to get maybe some, references from my teachers in year 10. And I think it was an attachment of my report cards as well. So it wasn't really any test.
That's true, but you were kind of tested in the sense you had to give marks and references. So.
Yeah, to really make a good impression as well. And, well, I guess it also depends around what the intake is of certain selective schools.
Of course. So I think now we've got a good picture of how we get into selective schools.
But why do they exist, Dhruv? And who can apply?
Well, why do they exist is a good question.
And do you have to can you apply anytime?
People can apply to selective schools. Some selective schools have different intake periods. So it's a case-by-case basis, certainly. In terms of why do they exist? We can get into that right now. Why do they exist, Fauzia?
Oh, controversial, Dhruv. Well, if you're like me, one of the reasons that you would have applied to is to further your education to a school that has more resources and is more equipped to assist you with passing the HSC. That was one of my reasons. And the second is more of a case-by-case basis, but I also wanted a new environment as well. But I think it was the HSC component. And welcome back. Dhruv did a very big jump cut because apparently Sydney weather's very volatile.
And it's very hot, so I had to take my jumper off.
It's a bit of a saucy topic, is it?
It can be part of the OnlyFans that you proposed in episode 2.
Gosh, that's really going to stick with us throughout. But Sydney weather, it went from beautiful sun to grizzly grey, hence the grey. Anyways, so Dhruv, we're going to talk a little bit about our experience with selective schools. In particular, some ideas around class structure, timetabling, wellness and lifestyle, balancing that in conjunction with studying for the HSC, and perhaps the transition assistance to university, what kind of initiatives your school put in place to help with that? Can kick us off?
Well, I can kick us off. Okay. Well, I'm coming from the perspective where I went to a selective school, Sydney Boys, from year 7 to year 12. So I had the transition straight from public school. And my experience, I think, on the overall was positive. You had a lot of smart people, a lot of smart students. Teachers were generally switched on and engaged with students' education. There were a lot of extracurricular activities available for those who were interested. I was not.
Is that what kind of extracurricular activities did you guys have? Because we had like, if you were in biology, you had a program to kind of further your biology knowledge. We had
It sounds
dance, I
like
think.
studying, not extracurricular.
No, it was a whole program, an after school program. It's pretty cool.
They call that tutoring.
No, it wasn't even tutoring. It was just learning different things, but it wasn't in the formal timetable. So if you wanted that extra brain power, you could.
It is fancy tutoring.
It's
It
prestige.
is rebranded, socially segregated tutoring.
That's what we call prestige tutoring in Western Sydney.
Prestige tutoring. Sorry, what was the question? What extracurricular activities?
Sounds about right.
Yes, yeah, you said what extracurricular activities we had. So we had sports, we had debating, we had like I don't know what they call it, like it's like boys army, like I don't know, not army,
Scouts?
scouts, I think, yeah, kind of scout stuff.
We had a lot of hiking stuff.
Yeah,
I never did it.
There's a few things like that.
Hell no.
So it's very, very involved if you wanted to be. So a lot of opportunities, which I thought was very good. So yeah, you've generally met a lot of people in selective schools that were very smart, career focused. At times, I think you have to realize that you're with a group of very smart people. I've said that word so many times. I'm sorry. But essentially, even if you're not doing well compared to everyone else, you're still probably doing pretty well compared to the rest of the grades. I think mentally, I think that's might be one of the harder things to understand or to appreciate in the moment, where you can feel very stupid, but you might not be. So that was my general experience. Like, there was a lot of opportunity for those who wanted it, and it really did push yourself to get really good marks because of the surrounding environment.
Yeah, there was never an emphasis to do those extracurriculars, but it was more so if you wanted to, because I think in the year 11 and 12 stages, your teachers also know that you are under pressured study conditions. But in saying that, the teachers, at least in my selective school, were absolutely incredible in the sense that they did encourage students to at least do some form of extracurricular. For me, it was buddy tutoring. I did that a lot on my free periods. It was actually quite funny because we'd go to the student center and all the tutors would be there, and there were too many tutors in excess of like however many actual students needed tutoring. So we'd have like 12 tutors and like just 2 students coming into the study center that day. But it was fun.
Yeah, well, tell us more about your experience in a selective school.
Yeah, class structure was pretty chill. I mean, you don't obviously get to decide on timetabling, but I really enjoyed my teachers. So timetabling was very chill, easy. I had free periods to either go home or and study or go back to high school. I rarely did that though. I was like,
You rarely went home, or you rarely went to school?
No, I rarely left school and then went back to school again because there was a free period in between the day. But I mean, now that I look at the luxury of being a bus ride away compared to now, I'm just like, oh, should have taken more advantage of that. Yeah, so HSC preparation was pretty good. We had resources on hand. We had teachers who really took their time out to help at all points of the day. I don't know about all actually, but they did their best to make sure our questions were answered. And coming from a low socioeconomic area, it's the best thing when the teachers can dedicate that time, even though we're underfunded to an extent, it really meant a lot having that human based interaction that you'll be fine, you'll get through your HSC. These are the resources you can check out.
So how did the students and teachers compare to your previous non-selective school?
Oh, Drew. Okay, the first is definitely the social dynamic. We're going to start listing. This is a really good question. The first is the social dynamic. I think, as you mentioned, more, I guess, intelligent students that you find at selective schools have more of that study mindset, and if they don't have that study mindset, they want to better their career or their life in the future. Even if they don't intend to go to university, they're here for a reason. My non-selective school was completely opposite. There were a few handful of students who unfortunately did apply to this selective school that I went to, but didn't get that opportunity to. Social dynamics, very different. Getting bullied compared to going to a place that was so accepting of you, in the sense that, like, I'll be vulnerable here. I got bullied because I was a complete nerd. Like, on my lunches, I'd be reading. Like, I literally, like, wait for the next class, sit outside it, and just, like, read. Or I would, when I used to play the piano, I would go into my music teacher would let me just go and sit in class and play piano. It was really nice on my lunch breaks. But yeah, it was really refreshing going to a school that acknowledged, and everyone was in that same boat of studying. So that's one. Two, I would say, is probably that people were willing to help each other. There was never really any degrading, competitive kind of toxic behavior. It was more like, if I need help with someone, I can go over to my friend or peer in the class. So I think the social dynamics, we kind of touched on the academic dynamics for sure. There was definitely more of that. And, I'm kind of biased because I, am from Western Sydney. So non-selective and selective school experience were had a stark difference between the two, that's for sure. How about you?
I can't speak to a public school or any other school really.
Maybe that mindset transition from like year 7 to 10 to 11 to 12, did you find yourself like more and more funneled into I need to do the HSC, I need to lock in and study mode?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think everyone was very interested in getting a good mark. That was a very big part of the school's culture and what the school wanted you to do. So everyone was on the same page, mostly in terms of getting a really good mark in the selective school exam. So, and there was support for university as well. They had a careers advisor of questionable usefulness.
Yeah.
I just don't remember them being very helpful.
Yeah, same here.
So
respectfully,
good
same here.
good idea, I think. But I think maybe it's just hard when you're in year 12 to get the best career advice, especially in a school where the only thing people care about is math and science, and that's what everyone's doing in year 11 and 12, apart from a few
Yeah.
exceptions.
I guess the career advisor is quite interesting. I never found them particularly useful. However, as you mentioned, we were quite young to really understand or gauge an understanding of university and what to do. But most of the time, I really didn't enjoy there was a backlog of students wanting to speak to the career advisors. So first, we were under-resourced to speak about our future steps. And two, it's a very subjective thing as well. And sometimes it doesn't help when you have someone who has a different idea of what career options you can pursue compared to someone who knows what they want to do and you're told something different. Like, it's kind of a bit of a biased session in a way. So I never really found them useful.
That's fair. Did you ever do some sort of agricultural studies
No.
in school? Farming or anything?
No, but I remember my friends and we would sit on the sports oval, and maybe like one or two of my friends had a crush on the school
Including
farmer.
you?
No, we'll get to that. So yeah, they would sit there and I'm like, oh, this is cute. Like the place where we sat in the Oval was nice, sunny. Like we had the best hot chips. If you went to St. Mary's, you know what's good until they changed their catering canteen contract. There was this really attractive farmer who would like maintain like our gardens at the school and our fruit and vegetables, which is really cute. And, you know, I was quite innocent. I was like, oh, this is nice. Just sitting on the Oval. And then it wasn't until I realized that my friends purposely sat there because they thought the farmer was cute. And then eventually I understood. I'm like, because I would see the farmer and I'm like, I understand now. Then I got nervous. So we still sat there all the way till like graduation, eating our lunch on our free periods.
I think selective school or non-selective school, you're going to have people who have crushes on their teachers or someone else at school.
Yeah, probably. We're not saying selective
That's
schools.
not a selective school only
Just because we have academically smart people, it doesn't mean that there's no naughtiness going on. Anyways, so Drew, in a very innocent way, the finger. Okay, so pros and cons of selective schools, Drew. Sorry, I kind of slapped your knee.
Everyone heard that because my mic is just right there, and it's like
I got a little bit excited. Pros and cons of selective schools. What do you think the pros are?
well, I already kind of touched a bit on the pros, and maybe I want you to add to it after I'm done with my spiel. But I think study culture is a big part.
You sounded American.
I just realized that as I said
Culture.
it. Culture. I don't know where that came from.
Like you've never done that before.
It's I'm camera shy, I think.
I think so.
Or maybe camera adept. Most successful YouTubers are American, so I'm just copying their style for views and clicks.
This is going straight into the trailer, Drew. Chuck it in. Chuck it in.
So study culture. I can't say it anymore. Study culture.
What the fuck was that? Okay.
Study culture.
Study culture.
Is that Australian enough? Study culture.
Now you're making me second guess your tone.
Okay. I think everyone's sick of me saying study culture.
What about it though? Is it because there's more emphasis on people studying towards the same objective? Is that?
That's right.
it?
It's like a army. Everyone is like really focused on a goal and objective. Everyone's like well trained and.
One thing I didn't doubt throughout our episodes are your analogies. So good to know that they're still there. So that's definitely one of them. What else?
Everyone's hardworking. Everyone's a good influence. Everyone's banding together, and it's a good chance to get good marks and do a course you might want to do at university. Do you have anything else to add?
Arguably, there are more resources at these selective schools. Again, speaking from a Western Sydney perspective, if you're someone who wants to further their HSC, the prospects of getting a good HR, wanting a new environment or wanting to shift to a more study environment, selective schools are your go-to, I would say. But that's pretty much a very high-level overview of pros. I mean, they're just great. That's all I can say.
Well, then you can maybe start us with some cons.
Sure. All right. So,
Are they so great? Do you have any other comments?
I think how are they so great?
Are they so great?
They are great.
Do you have any other cons that you might want people to know?
So we'll start off with the cons. I think sometimes selective schools, just the kind of atmosphere and environment with your peers can be so bubbled into the HSE where sometimes even if you've studied for like hours straight, you'll go back to school the next day and you're like, oh, like I'm tired, I'm exhausted, but I have to study because I'm seeing people around me study. And if I don't study, maybe I'll fall behind and I'll lose like 10 ATAR marks. So it's kind of that, it's quite pressurizing in that regard. It's quite, you're like in a bubble of just studying, I guess. And often that can affect you in a social perspective of not really wanting to socialize with anyone because you are just focused on doing the HSC. And often because there's an emphasis to do the HSC, sometimes kids who then progress to university, if that's your next path, because you've just been so bubbled in, you kind of forget those social skills at university. So it really does affect you in like the first few months or year of uni.
I think bubble is the word of this podcast. Because I think that's definitely the biggest con in my experience is that everyone you meet, for as intelligent as they are and as great as some people are, it is very much there is one path in life, which is to get good marks, do your math subjects, your science subjects, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be an engineer. And that's really the marks of success. And I think I touched upon this in a previous episode, but you don't really meet many people outside of that. So everyone you know is essentially, I won't say the same person, but they all have very similar objectives in terms of what they want to do at the university level. And I think when you do get into the university or step outside of that bubble, you realize that there's actually so many different ways to make your mark or be successful in the world. And it's like the schools don't really teach you, at least the culture doesn't really teach you about all these other ways. It's very much a factory to optimize your marks. And if they can get students who get good marks, that's a really big plus. And everything else is harder in the sense that it's not as much of a focus, is just this more well-roundedness. I think those extracurricular activities do help with that, but I think unavoidably you're just not meeting people that have largely different backgrounds or aspirations than you. Everyone who's grouped there has a singular sole purpose.
But you touched on a good point, Drew. Like, I think that when you go to a selective school, your end goal is pretty much the HSC. And sometimes I think that the culture that's been created only takes into account of students who will go to university. But sometimes I think that these schools may forget that the atmosphere may be someone may just want to do well in the HSC but may not go to university. So I think the kind of post year 12 aspects are quite important to take into consideration of. However, in saying so, before we move on to the next exciting segment, did you find that your selective school kind of equipped you for those next steps? Like, did you know that law was your kind of for sure step?
I think it equipped me in the sense that I could get the marks, but it wouldn't. I don't think it equipped me socially or anything for university.
Is that why you did comms? Are we decoding it right now?
I did comms because I was a bit of a rebel, even though it's not
a rebel.
Yeah, it's doing an arts degree in a selective school is like unheard of.
Also, there's a hair. Can I? Yeah. Before we move on to the next segment. Okay, good. Sorry, it was just there. It was annoying me. All right, so that sums up.
I think we know you're very annoyable in your previous episode.
Like I said, if you're discourteous on the train, that's when you'll start annoying Shireen.
I should have also added. I think I went to school. I was a bit. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, righto.
I went to a school that was a bit further away, so I got used to catching public transport. I think that built that sense of independence. So that was also a good pro.
I had the privilege of having the bus stop right in front of my house.
How could someone be so lucky?
I know. If only it just translated to my corporate life, you know?
If only that could exist.
I know. So interesting. But the sense of independence, yes, I think that was quite important. So I think that when you allow your children to go to schools that are a little bit farther away or outside of your suburb, I think it really hones into them navigating public transport, being a bit more wary of like stranger danger and stuff. Like, I think that's quite important. But Drew, I'm excited because we are going to play a game. And guys, I have so much fun in creating these games that sometimes I don't know if you're excited. Are you excited?
I'm so excited. I love games.
You're stoked?
I love playing.
How stoked are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
I am stoked.
That is a 5. You have to be really stoked.
I am very G'd up.
G'd up.
Another word or phrase.
And another repetition from me. Add that to the collage. All right, Drew. So we're going to play Who is More Likely To, and I'm going to leave it up to you because I think this is going to be interesting.
I can read some of these out.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Can I do the first one though?
Sure thing.
Cry over a B+. That's Drew.
I mean, I'm used to getting bad marks in the selective school, so I actually think that's you. I wasn't that great. Like B plus would have been a good mark for me. I would have been ecstatic.
No,
With a B with a B plus.
Actually, that's true. In year 11 and 12, yes, a B plus is actually pretty dang good. But in uni, you'd say, "Oh, I didn't do well," but you got like an 85.
That's outside the scope of this conversation.
I know.
Please
but anyway,
reorient yourself back to high school.
Who is more likely to? That's Drew for a B plus.
That's you. I still think it's you.
No.
Yes.
No.
Little cry. Little cry.
I'll give it to you. Maybe not in uni. Okay. Do you want to read the second one out?
Who is more likely to have a colorful page, such as highlighting?
3, 2, 1.
It's you
me.
for sure.
Yeah, I had so many highlighters.
I'm so basic.
Did you not use highlighters? You would have.
That's too advanced for me.
No way.
There's too many colors and too much cognitive overload.
Cognitive overload.
I just do this for fun now. I just get you to repeat what I just said.
I'm just trying to have a plain text, simple English conversation, but this guy's adding all the psychological terminologies.
It's like a milkshake in Succession.
We love that guy. What a legend, eh?
I'm just like acting as him right now.
You could be, but I think he does it better, eh?
He does. I don't have that range of vocabulary.
Very eloquent.
in my book.
So we know that Fowles will cry over B plus, and she has a very colourful page with highlighting. Who I can't talk. Who is more likely to be the HSC procrastinator?
Me.
No, we've got to count down. 3, 2, 1, Drew.
Me.
No, really?
Yeah. I mean, you voted for me too. Why do you sound so surprised? Like, what just happened?
Repetition. I got tears in my eye. What did you do to my hair? I look like I have spiders coming from them. Okay. So Drew would be the HSC procrastinator.
Yeah, I didn't study as hard as I could have.
All right, editing Drew. Who is more likely to carry a big ass backpack?
3, 2, 1, you.
I was going to say me. Sorry, I hesitated because I'm like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, you like your big backpack.
I think I did.
Yeah.
I think there would be moments where my mum would be like, what the heck did you put in this?
Exactly. It's a bit ridiculous.
Who is more likely to chuck down a KFC bucket? Or like a bucket full of chicken?
3,
2, 1. Drew!
I mean, you're a vegetarian.
Not in high school. I was no, not in high school.
In selective school, you were.
I think the T end of it, yes.
Okay. But yeah, I love chicken.
You want to tell the people your KFC days? What would you order?
Oh, the wings were quite good.
Really?
The wings, yeah.
How did the price differ from back then to now?
Look, I like KFC, but we were close to Hungry Jack's, and that was my go-to.
Hungry Jack's is good.
They had the stunner meal. I think.
Are you salivating?
They had a $5 stunner meal where I think you got the Storm, which is similar to a McFlurry. You had fries. You had a burger.
Is a Storm? Is that just similar to like
a McFlurry? Yeah, but Hungry Jack's version.
Oh, interesting. You know. Oh.
So you had that, chips, a Coke, and a burger for $5. That just blows. That's how old we are. That something like that was $5, and that was absolutely delicious.
Yeah,
that was my go-to meal.
You know what the listeners would be thinking as I'm about to say the next thing?
What is that?
I've never had KFC before.
What?
I've never had a what's that thing? Storm?
That might be the most.
Did you say Storm?
Yeah, I did.
Oh yes.
I was gonna say that might be the most disrespectful thing you've said. Okay. That we have to edit out of this podcast.
Yeah, we have to keep it in.
So blasphemy.
Let me just clear up 2 things. 1, we're both vegetarian. But 2, we did eat meat back in the days. 2, because I'm Islamic, we had to try and find a halal KFC, allegedly. That never happened. So I just never ended up having KFC. I did have their chips. I think I had maybe their gravy at one point.
You did.
It was really good.
It was. KFC's good.
All right. Who is more likely to have 100 Quizlets?
I think
3, 2, 1.
You.
I feel so offended every time.
Let's do more rapid fire.
Yeah. All right.
things to get through.
So that's fouls. Okay. 3. Wait. Apply to. Got too excited. Apply to early entry programs just in case.
You.
3. We're not counting down?
Nah.
Okay. All right. Yep. Sounds about right. Who is most likely to memorize the English creative essay so they wouldn't have to think from scratch?
Well, that's me, maybe, I think.
No way!
Yeah.
I did
I didn't
too!
have a creative bone in my body, so I had to remember.
I did too! So we had to write 2 essays in a creative. I would remember them from like top to bottom.
I remembered every single word of my essays.
Me too.
And I would just go in there, shut my brain off and be like,
Me too.
just write.
And I just adapted to like the discovery question or whatever we got. But these days I can't even remember where I parked my car. And that just happened like a week ago.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I can read the next one.
Yes, go for it.
Who's more likely to flex their ATAR on socials? That will be you.
That's true. You got higher than me.
Yeah, but it's not high, it's who flexes it. You'd flex it.
Yeah, I'm gonna take into account of that stuff. You know?
Yeah, so you're
Yo-
the flexer.
Yeah, girl from Western Sydney, like, debunk the stereotypes. Absolutely.
That's right. You shouldn't feel ashamed for flexing.
Absolutely.
I'm going to finger point. All right, who is more likely to make a HSC Excel spreadsheet
Me.
study schedule? I mean, obviously.
I had
Does it look
actually.
like I have the motivation to make a study schedule.
It's all mental for you, I reckon. Ask for extra homework. Me.
You're very studious.
You never ask for extra homework?
Why would I ask for extra homework?
I really like
That's
economics.
less time doing other stuff.
Oh, that's true. Sleep in the library, but call it a study recharge nap.
Oh, probably
Drew.
you.
Really?
I never went to like the library.
I never went to a library either.
I mean, I did go, but like
I went to my school's
seriously.
library, but not to a public library.
I went a few times, but like I don't nap. You nap.
Maybe I did actually.
You're more
I-
likely to nap than me. So
No,
you
I
win,
I
you
think
win
there
the
were a
question.
few moments where I did one of these.
That sounds about right. That's very consistent.
Say I didn't study but got a good mark, Drew.
Yeah, I
For
mean,
sure.
It's true though.
You still do.
I didn't study though.
Yeah, you're just too good.
Because I'm with people who study like all day, and I didn't.
Through osmosis, you learnt your.
So yeah, I learned through their studying.
He got his certificate through osmosis, guys. Have a minor. Sorry, you're meant to read.
Have a minor breakdown over scaling. For you.
Yeah, I think there were like a few times where I slipped from like first to like third place.
Can't relate.
And then I had like
I wasn't ranked that high.
I had like a vengeance against this girl who sat next to me who stole my number 1 place.
I'd have been happy coming 90th, and here you are coming first. So that sounds about right.
That was just in English though. Anything maths you don't want to know. Peak in year 11, burnout in year 12.
I didn't have a peak. It's probably you.
Me neither.
I say you're more likely.
Really?
Yeah. Just because I know it's not me.
Undecided.
Enroll in more tutoring, not because you have to, but because you want to. I wouldn't do tutoring if
Me.
I wanted to.
For maths.
I mean, I did tutoring, but not because I wanted to.
Or you tutored other students, or you
I got tutored.
Oh, you got tutored, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like tutoring is so common for like year 11 and 12. Like it's not because you're an idiot
Yeah, it's just you
at
wanna
like
get
one
good
aspect
marks.
of your
Yeah.
subject. It's just like I want to like make sure I've got this concept down
Look,
pat.
I think you definitely win because you just told us about your biology experience, where you went
No,
to extracurricular
no,
biology classes.
I dropped biology right before we transitioned into year 12.
But you voluntarily went to that, so you fit this question.
No, I didn't. My sister did.
But you went to the extracurricular activities.
No. Oh, well, no, just the buddy program tutoring stuff.
You tutored others, or you got tutored?
I tutored others as well.
Okay,
But we barely got any
that's
because
learning
12
through
tutors and 2 students. Like, we were just weird. All right, Drewby.
Well, that's a wrap for the segment.
I hope you liked it. That's so fun.
It is. I am stoked. Is that the word we used?
Very stoked.
I am stoked. I am very stoked. But we are going to transition.
Cut it, Drew. Now.
That's not cutting. I'm just like doing a nice visual effect.
Shh, wait, we're going this way?
It's like a swipe.
Okay, swipe, Drew. This way. Keep going.
But like, it's not an actual transition. It's like for the camera.
Oh, okay, swoop. All right, next segment.
Exactly.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about whether selective schools are fair. So, what did I just say? I said are fair, but it felt like I said affair.
I mean, affair is affair.
That 3-second pause is critical. So we're going to explore whether selective schools are perhaps biased, and we're going to explore different kinds of questions around funding models, resource allocations. I'm going to talk a little bit here. Whether underfunding impacts the quality of education, whether all selective schools are treated equally, what measures can be taken to ensure that students are treated equally across all selective schools.
Can you also please address the Guardian quote that you quoted earlier on in this episode? When you respond to this, I will give the floor to you. Thank you.
Yes. Well, wait, you want me to go through the facts now?
I want you to continue this question. You said you have a lot to say, so I'm giving you the floor.
All right. Well, we are exploring these socioeconomic disparities, whether scholarships and such will assist entry into selective schools. Looking at our research, I wanted to kind of focus a little bit on low SES areas, and I feel like underfunding for sure does impact the full, or I guess the optimal, that selective schools can operate in Western Sydney. So, from The Guardian, there's an increasing reliance on parental contributions. Now, we've seen parents having to contribute, stationery for their primary school students, but this is going into high school. So this raises concerns about equity because it may disadvantage students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who really see selective schools as a escape to a better future. Or an enhanced one. Critics argue that this trend undermines the principle of free public education. Now, Drew, that's a bit of a powerful concern and quote that we've plucked out of The Guardian, but tell me a little bit about your thoughts around this, because I think this is just marvelous.
That's a bit of a swapperoo. I asked you.
A swapperoo as well.
I asked you what you thought, and then you just pivoted it right back towards me.
Sorry, what I think before we go on to you then. I think that's true. There's more reliance on parents to contribute to their child's high school. I think that can be unfair, particularly when you are in a suburb or an area where there is primarily blue collar working styles. I think that not all selective schools, and these are my controversial opinions, not all selective schools are the same, because there is that aspect of underfunding and inequitable outcomes as a result because of this underfunding. And that can be, due to or string on other effects. Speaking to my sister, she has a bit of burnout perhaps from having to juggle the multiple class allocations because there's not enough not enough funding and not enough resources in selective schools. So I think maybe the outcome that you get is quite different, and I think we're not on that leveled playing field yet with selective schools from low SES areas compared to those who may those schools that have more connections, perhaps to universities or just more funding generally. I'll hand it over to you.
What do you think, though, about fairness in the sense of we're taking away all these smart kids from these schools and putting them in one place, and then you're lowering the performance of the schools that they're taking the smart kids from? Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, well, I was on that end of the spectrum because when I left my year 7 to 10 school, it was just a pattern of people leaving in year 10. And it wasn't a lot of people. It would be like max 8-10 people leaving to this selective school because it was just really well known in our area to assist with the HSC. But I know that some of my science teachers and just some teachers generally tried to keep me at the school because they wanted me to go on to be like a captain of the school and really pioneer kind of the leadership and a bit of the framing of the school from a student's perspective. However, I think that it comes back down to, if you're not going to change now, what's going to change if you stay there? Like it just made no sense for me to stay in an environment where I couldn't really see positive change. And again, I'm not saying it's the teacher's fault. I think that it's just unfortunately the socioeconomic disparities that schools out west have to face. But I think that it is sad that intelligent students do have to leave, but there's not much you can do about it.
Well, what if we had no selective schools? Would that be a better situation where you can have more funding maybe and all the smart kids don't leave? Is that a better world than what we are now, where
Yeah.
selective schools select all the good talent, as they call it, and everyone else is left for scraps?
Yeah. I reckon for sure. I think because
You're saying scrap selective schools?
no. But I think like if that was a hypothetical world where we didn't have selective schools and we put funding allocation to non-selective schools to assist with the HSC, I think that would be feasible in the sense that these non-selective schools would perhaps introduce like internal programs in their schools to assist students with the HSC, and those internal programs would entail maybe more intensive classes or resources. So, you know, it really comes down to the school and also the percentage of students who are willing to EOI into these internal programs, if that was a hypothetical.
I guess if you could rebuild the entire schooling system from scratch, would you have selective schools or would you not have selective
I
schools?
can be Prime Minister for a day.
Or you can be
Make sure
God.
you voted, guys. You don't want to cop that fine.
I think this will be released long after the
Oh,
vote.
well, you should have voted. And if you didn't, well, you'll receive that fine eventually.
We'll make sure to report you.
Yes, maybe comment your user down below and we'll do that. Sorry, so how we can change the scape of selective
If
schools?
you had unlimited power and unlimited authority, would you, if you could redesign everything from scratch with no consequences, would you eliminate selective schools?
Oh, tough question. And I'm biased because I went to a selective school, but I'm going to say, yeah. I think that there could be, we should focus on upping the current dynamics of non-selective schools so that there shouldn't be a need for selective schools in the first place, because, as we said, it can socially segregate students. And we can do better to support our schools generally. And I don't think it's fair if we have a huge volume of schools, but there's not enough funding, and that results in some schools having inequities because of, you know, the introduction of selective schools or like more like superior schools being, you know, in your suburb. I think that we can do a better job to change the existing framework, and that may be around having more consistent learning outcomes that take into account of the theoretical and practical day-to-day, and you know, offering more electives. I said that I moved because there weren't too many electives at my current school. I don't know if that's the case now, but you know, if we just kind of change that current dynamic, maybe they could have had those electives. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
It's a very tricky question, and I think there are a lot of good arguments for and against, and I will just say that I think there's a very strong case for, as you said, for removing selective schools. And obviously I say that someone who enjoyed my experience there and think it's beneficial, but I think instead of selecting people at an earlier age, I think if we could focus on our efforts on trying to improve schooling for everyone generally, rather than saying if you're smart in year 6 or year 10, you're going to get a much better experience. I think that's got its benefits, but I think it's maybe not the most healthiest from a society point of view. I do want to talk about the Guardian quote.
Yeah.
Can you bring that up?
We've got a bunch of research here.
The first one, it says that
this one
the
here?
Guardian, the top one, it says that they cater for high potential and gifted students. Yes. I have very big problem with assigning people at such an early age as high potential or gifted, because let's face it, at year 6 it's going to be very hard to tell what is which, and I am very concerned about the implications that you are saying when you're saying that these schools cater for high potential and gifted students. Are you saying that students who don't make selective schools are not highly potential or gifted? So I think speaking in terms like this is very, if you're talking about fairness and the inequities,
very degrading
of selective schools, I think this is maybe a big part of it, is how we talk about them. I think that's a big problem.
Yeah.
In society, if we're using these words and throwing them out like that, because words have impact. And I think what you're really implying is that if you're not in a selective school, you're not high potential and you're not gifted.
Yeah.
And I think that everyone's got their own path, and I think there's a lot of smart people who don't go to selective schools who outperform people who go to selective schools.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Even going on that traditional metric of ATARs, there's a lot of people outside these schools that do well. So I just don't agree with some of these wordings around what's happening.
And that's how biases start when you get into like university. Like if we're cultivating an environment where like we're separating intelligent from non-intelligent people, I don't think that's fair. I think that sometimes people may not realize how intelligent they are until maybe like, you know, later on in their studies or life. So I don't think we should, like, that's, I agree. That's quite an unfair metric. So if we could come to a yes or no answer on whether selective schools should be scrapped, yes, is for my end.
But that is not the question that we're going to ask, because we live in our world.
Yes. And we come from selective schools, but I think we're coming from that equity perspective.
I was going to say, we live in the world as it is and not as it should be. So I would say that.
Very noble.
Very noble.
Very noble.
I heard it from someone. I can't give credit because I forgot where I heard this from.
There's going to be a lot of IP disputes rising from this episode.
We'll get ready to defend ourselves from maybe the Guardian. if someone from the Guardian somehow finds this episode.
We can also, in exchange, because we didn't validate yet, but we can do an article for you. No worries.
Of course.
All right.
I was going to say one more thing.
Sure.
Is that I think someone like you and someone like me, for example, I think we have very good individual decision.
Something's in the air today.
We have very good individual reason to go to a selective school, to get a better education, and to make sure that we are doing as best as we can. And I think in the system that currently exists, I think it makes sense to go to a selective school if you can. That is different to whether they should exist in the first place.
I agree. And I also think that there's a lot of the Guardian quotes here, and there is some stats around from the Department of Education and Training as well. There's a concern that selective schools often cater to students from more advantaged backgrounds with higher parental education levels and professional occupations, leading to concerns about social segregation within the public education system. What do you have to say about that?
I didn't notice it in my time at school. I mean, obviously it's just one school and there's 40 odd, so I can't speak for all of them. But I think people generally came from a range of backgrounds. But I think your experience in Western Sydney might be more appropriate because maybe there's not as many people in Western Sydney going to selective schools. And I will say this as well, we didn't mention it, but the test itself, I think, caters for people who have the opportunity to go to tutoring, and those who go to tutoring generally come from perhaps more, what's the word they use, advanced?
Advantaged backgrounds?
Advantaged, sorry. Yes. People who go to tutoring generally come from more advantaged backgrounds because they can afford extra classes. That might not be something that...
I think it's more from the extracurricular affordability.
That's right, but So you're selecting people who do well in tutoring, who get tutoring and do well because of that, and they might be certainly they're not. I'm not saying they're not smart, but these opportunities might not have been available for other people.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
so someone in, let's say, Western Sydney, like you said, who's pretty intelligent, does a selective test, doesn't get in. There might not be no more. There might be equal intelligence with someone who lives in a more advantaged area, gets tutoring and gets in because of that, because of all the extra work that tutoring did. So I think I do agree that there is some sort of selection bias
Yes,
in the
I
sense
agree.
of how we're testing,
Yeah.
and I can see why that would lead to an outcome like this.
I honestly wish we lived in a world where these criterias weren't so, selective, because I think that like really I really wish they weren't selective. Well, okay. Let me take a step back.
You just use the word selective.
I know.
That's why I liked it.
We don't like double ups, do we? It's like the other day I was writing my essay and I saw two ands and I'm like, this has to go.
Like right next to each other?
Oh, it was like within almost a sentence of each other. I'm like, no, we're not even going to use as well as.
You're gonna use dashes, commas.
No, we're not using none of that. None of that.
Also,
we're going to rewrite that sentence so it will be more concise. But I absolutely agree with you. I think that sometimes people, it also depends on the ability to have access to a selective school as well. And it also depends on when you apply to a selective school, because, you had your experience of applying at the end of year 6, but I had that experience of applying in year 10. So I think that it differs in that regard as well. But, Dhruv, I have some stats. We're plugging so many stats because this is such a juicy topic. But according to low SES students, outcomes for low SES students, this is taken from the Department of Education and Training's website, 65% of students from low SES areas completed year 12. Well done. 54% were earning above minimum wage at age 24. Please come onto our podcast to talk about your ways. 63% were enrolled in tertiary VET programs, vocational education training programs, while 32% enrolled in university. Now, we don't know if those numbers have changed. I actually should have added when those numbers were present.
How do they compare to everyone else?
That's right. I don't know.
That's all right. We can move past it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But Dhruv, I wanted to get your thoughts on the stats. Like, are they valid? Do you think that they're biased in some way? Are they taking into account
Fake
of
news.
all fake news?
No, that's not what I.
We need a bit more data.
See, there is also another quote from someone in data, and I don't know if it's appropriate for this podcast, but it's something along the lines of stats are like bikinis.
Here we go.
What they reveal is interesting, but it's what they hide that's more important. I thought you'd like that one.
Please tell me you made that up.
No, I didn't. I take no credit for this, but I thought it was a very apt quote. I take no attribution. It wasn't me.
I'm gonna have to recover from that one. I've got some tears in my eyes.
That's my answer to your question. I'll have to do more digging. Maybe in a future episode we can talk about that.
Please locate the source of this quote. I'd like to commend them.
Maybe we can put it in the footnotes.
It's very applicable in different contexts. I agree. All right, Dhruv.
So let's start wrapping up. We've been talking for a while.
You expect me to move on after that part?
Please continue then.
I'm here snotting up and tearing up. All right, now. Okay, so the bottom line, Dhruv, are selective schools worth enrolling into? Are they good for society? And in particular, what are our reflections on selective schools now that we've already been through the process and we have reflections on how we could perhaps change the dynamics of them?
I think we've already kind of covered this, so I'm going to just give a simply simple answer to this question. First question, are selective schools worth enrolling into? Yes.
Mhm.
Second question, are they good for society? Debatable, but I might lean towards no.
It's a neutral argument.
It is.
Yes and no.
It is a hedged argument. I'm hedging.
Hedged. Why am I dropping all this terminology? I love it.
We have a very educated audience, and I have to speak as though I am very intelligent myself.
Hedged is a very nice word. You know, perfectly rectangular. No? Okay. Where are we, Drew? Are they worth enrolling into on my end? Certainly. Are they good for society? Maybe.
You did worse than I did. I at least said which way I lean. You just like maybe.
Well, that's yes and no, bro. So yes, because like they further your education and betterment in the whole HSC process. No, because they contribute to social segregation and unfair equities when we could be focusing on current schooling, non-selective dynamics.
So I did ask you earlier if you had unlimited power, and you said you would remove selective schools. So I think your answer's more towards no, given what you just said.
Yeah, that's how it feels. If you're a maybe, you never know if you're a maybe, yeah, or like maybe no.
Yeah, nah, or nah, yeah.
Yeah, nah.
All right,
Yeah,
that's a wrap for episode 6. Yeah, nah. That's
hedge.
That is the perfect way to end it.
Yes, well, thank you very much for tuning into episode 6 of Simply Simple. We hope you found this episode a bit more insightful, I guess, on our reflections of going through the process.
And if you want more data, we can go through data.
Yes.
So like, let us know. We're trying to vibe, but like, if you're like, nah, break it down bit by bit, we can also break it down.
If you want to fact check,
yeah,
or if you want to tell us a stat that you've otherwise heard or think that we have incorrectly put in, then please let us know.
Should we get a Twitter and like tweet?
Ooh. First following is The Guardian.
I will at The Guardian. This divisive language is inappropriate.
Yes, yet to validate. But anyways, we're not putting anyone on blast.
We're kidding.
Are we? It's not simply simple, is it?
It's just hedging ourselves against the lawsuit.
Hedgingly simple. Anyways, so we will tune in with you in episode 7.
I just realized it's actually the perfect episode to do this, because episode 6 is like year 6, and episode 7 is like when you go into selective school.
Wow.
I know.
We planned it all out.
We planned it out. So this is our selective test.
My reaction told you that we didn't, huh? Or did it?
We're good actors now. Not really.
I was going to say you're punching the gun.
I am punching the gun.
Yeah.
How do you punch a gun?
You just punch it in self-defense.
Punching a gun.
Yeah, get some knuckle busters on.
All right, we don't
Metal
have guns
to metal.
in Australia. That's maybe for American audience. We're
Pretty sure this will be cut out.
They can punch their own guns.
It could be a toy gun. We haven't specified.
We're really off the rails.
We really are. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you in the next.
Where I might not be there, but peace.
Who says peace anymore?
Sorry. What's our sign off? How do we know?
Stopping.
How do we sign off normally?
I think we just say bye.
Bye. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Bye.